Hello class, we're working on chapter 10, object-oriented thinking, and I'm looking at my Revell table of contents at the video information, and the BMI class has an awesome video where they walk you through creating all of this code, and I followed along with that and have used NetBeans to create the BMI class. Now, we earlier did a BMI calculation and we had everything all set so that we just used one class and one method and created a BMI calculation. And for this application, we're actually going a little further and we're creating a BMI class so that we can instantiate an instance of the BMI for a given person. So in our BMI class, looking at that code here in NetBeans, I have my class statement and then my variables that are declared for the class. And in this class I have some static variables. Static final is the keyword that we want to use, and that makes this available to our class, but it is a constant value that will not be changed, making the processing more efficient. Now in my BMI class, as I continue on, I have a couple of constructors. The first constructor expects a name, age, weight, and height to be passed, and it constructs an instance of the BMI class with those variables for this instance. Our second constructor expects the name, weight, and height, and when we use that constructor, we're going to go ahead and create an instance of the BMI class, calling this constructor using our this keyword, and we're going to set our default age to 20. So we're going to try that using the debugger so you can see how that code executes, because it can be a little bit unclear. Next, we have all of our getters and setters for our BMI. Most of our variables that are in our BMI calculation are allowed access through the get properties. So we return those class level variables to the constructor that's calling us or the class that's calling us. But notice that we don't really have any setters. We're not letting our calling module update these fields once they've been set. So if we use that default age, that's the age we've got, because we don't have any setters or mutator methods defined in this class. We only have getter or accessor methods. Now a couple of other methods that we have are getStatus does an if statement to determine whether this person's BMI qualifies them as underweight, normal, overweight, etc. And our getBMI does that wonderful calculation that we had seen in our previous code, where again we're using our final values to make sure that we get the right results to a very exacting level, and we have parentheses appropriately in our calculation to make sure that no rounding errors occur. Okay, so that's our BMI class. In our tester, we've called it use BMI class, and in that code, we create an instance of our BMI object called BMI1. We pass some default properties. Kim Yang, she's 18, she weighs 145, and her height is 170. Then when we construct that object, we use our print line to print out some information about our BMI object so that we can check to see that our object was built properly. So I'm going to run this. In the book, if you notice, they do create a second instance of a BMI. We'll do that here in a second. But for now, I want to just run this and see our output for Kim Yang. And there we are. She is, her BMI is 20.81, and that's about all that we're outputting there about Kim Yang. I need to add in something to get that status, don't you think? So let's add that in. So I've gotten her name, and let's see, right here, I duplicated her name. Have you ever done that? The BMI for Kim Yang is 20.81 Kim Yang. Well, right there, I should have used the get status. So easy enough to fix. Let's try it again. I'm going to run it. Now I should see my correct output. The BMI for King Yang is 20.81 and she is normal. So I think that's what we were expecting. Now we're going to do Susan King here. She's going to be a little different. So we could do this however we want. In our book, they create instance 1 of our BMI object and then output it, and then they create instance 2 and output it. I'll do that same thing. I'll copy and paste. And I'm going to create object BMI 2, and this one, instead of Kim Yang, is going to be Susan King. Now, whenever we create a tester like this, I would refer to it as hard-coded values because we're hard-coding the values in our tester that we want to use to create an instance of our class. It can be kind of a hard concept to understand at first, but we've created this class code. We know that we're going to need this object somewhere in a system somehow, and then we're going to go ahead and create a little special tester app to run it and make sure our results are coming out appropriately. Now, Susan is a little heavier. She's 215, and notice we've removed the age argument. So when we use our BMI constructor, we're going to be using that constructor that doesn't include that age, right? Because it's an overridden constructor, and we're going to run it with the default age of 20. So let's double check. We should see output for both of our BMI objects now when we run. And first I see Kim Yang. Oops, she's all good. What did I forget to change? In our output, we need to change and make sure we're using our second BMI object, right? So when we create a BMI object, we're giving it a name. In this case, BMI 2. Now, I could have named it something different. I could have called it like Susan's BMI or, you know, maybe something not so nice BMI, but I can call it whatever I want. And in our book, they called it BMI 1 and BMI 2. So notice how when we refer to the methods or properties available in our class, we are naming the instance that we assigned to that class in our program when we created that new instance. Let's run that again, and we see Kim Yang, and she's normal, and then Susan King is obese. So we notice that we defaulted to that age of 20. We don't see that in our output, but that's true. Now I wanted to show you how to use the debugger when you're working with NetBeans, and using the debugger gives us some options for us to control what we're seeing as our code is executed. And the easiest way to control execution is to set a breakpoint, and this is a place where we're telling NetBeans to stop and let us control the execution of our program. So I'm going to create a breakpoint right here on line 17 by clicking. I'm going to make sure that I actually did that. It says breakpoint enabled. All right, so notice I could have right-clicked there and done that same thing. Now I want to do some debugging. So normally I would press the play button to run my project, but I'm going to go ahead and press the debug project button instead. And when I do that, we should see a little bit of change in the way things are looking. Now, first of all, I've got some information up here about where that breakpoint is set. I could set multiple breakpoints if I wanted to, and I could add them in this window. Next, I have a very important window, and that's the variables screen, and it's showing me all of the variables that are within my program right now. Now, notice at my breakpoint setting here, I have already built my BMI 1 object, and I've already output that information, and now I'm telling the debugger to stop execution right here and pause for me while I decide what to do. I could go ahead and look at the contents of my BMI 1 object. I would see that the name string is set to a value of Kim Yang, the age is an integer set to a value of 18, etc. Now I might see other properties and variables within my variables setting, but I want to continue on and see how I can walk through the creation of our BMI2 object. This is going to be our Susan King object, and of course we named it BMI2. Now I have a lot of different settings that I can use while I'm in a breakpoint mode, and we'll see them up here at the top of our screen. We can stop, pause it, continue on, but I want to do step into, and what step into does is say I want to step through each line of this code so that I can see what's going on. So if I click step into, I'm going to begin executing the line of code that is at my breakpoint. Right now that line has not been executed, so I'm going to start executing it. As I go, notice the first thing that happens is I am now within the BMI constructor that included 3 parameters. Remember, when I create my BMI2 object, I left out the age argument, so it executes the BMI constructor that does not include the age. I can see that because this line of code is highlighted now. That's going to be the next line of code that gets executed. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to step into, and I should see my main constructor get executed that expects all the parameters. So I'm updating this instance of the BMI object. And what I'm going to do is set all of the different property values. So my name property, excuse me, is going to be set to whatever was passed to me in my constructor. We can see that over here in our variables. Now notice I see all of the parameters that have been set to me. Name, age, weight, height. Those are the values that I'm going to use to update this instance of the BMI class. But this instance of the BMI class is actually contained here in this. So right now my name variable is null, but if I execute this line of code, I will see that now it's set to the string of Susan King. Now again, my age variable is null, but if I execute this line of code, I'll see it gets set to 20 because that's what I passed this constructor when I built my BMI. Now I'm going to keep going, stepping into. We can see all our variables getting set to specific values. We return then to the closing curly bracket on our initial constructor, and then we should return back to our tester class and see that we have finished executing this line of code. We now have an instance of a BMI2 class module created. Let's find it here in our variables. Where is it? We have BMI1. It's not letting me go down. Maybe I need to go ahead and step into the next line of code. There it is. Now there's my BMI2 with all of the appropriate values set for that instance of our BMI class. Now I'm going to go ahead and execute the print statement to output this information. So in my print line, it looks like one line of code. We know it's more. We know that we're calling several methods in this one line of code. So as I step into it, first I'm going to see that it's going to output the BMI4, and then, well, it's going to do some print line here stuff for us, system things. I want to step over some of this. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, so we will just walk through our print line here. Different editors work a little differently, and you may have to figure out how to step over these kinds of things as you're working with NetBeans. As you can tell, it's not the one that I use the most often. I'm going to try to step over that. Step over, step over, step over, step over. Come on, get back to our code. And there we are, back to our code. Now I want to see our output, and we can see that the BMI for Susan King now has been output. In the way NetBeans works, we may have to find some configuration parameters to get it to let us see the get BMI code being executed, get name being executed. So if you watch the other video, you'll see how Eclipse did it by default, where it showed us our code being executed. And again, these can be little minor differences that you might have to work out by watching some YouTube videos or some different things here. But I see that now I've got everything all worked out. Notice in my BMI2, I have those static values because they're still part of that class. There's something that was defined there. So you can use the debugger to step through your code. Again, you might have to do a little bit of experimenting to step over and step into things so that you can see exactly what's going on. But it's very important for you to try these things so that you can see how the code is being executed and how things are fitting together. We've left the world of top-down code. Now we're into some complicated things where we're executing our class level code from other class modules. So stepping through our code is a very, very valuable resource, and I hope that you will use this resource to your best of your abilities. Thank you.